Hello, I'm Peter Robinson. A few days ago, June 22nd, we learned that our friend and colleague here at the Hoover Institution, Fouad Ajami, had succumbed to cancer. Born in Lebanon and then an immigrant to this country when he was just a little bit short of 18 years old, Fouad was an entirely singular person, a man with a profound devotion to the United States of America, but also an abiding love for his own Arab world. Fouad was convinced that democracy represented a gift for all mankind, a gift that the Arab world would eventually embrace. He approved of the American invasion of Iraq, calling it a noble enterprise, his words. But ever the realist, our involvement in Afghanistan made him queasy. He felt we were being manipulated by tribal leaders, and a word that he used in conversation with me, brigands. The Arab Spring thrilled Fouad. He believed that it gave the Arab world a glimpse of what it might become if only it embraced democracy. If only the Arab world had lived up to Fouad's hopes. But history isn't over, and we may permit ourselves that somewhere Fouad is looking on, refusing to give up on the United States of America or the Arab world. Here, a few clips of Fouad during interviews over the years on Uncommon Knowledge. Quoting the president of Afghanistan, "A very thin curtain distinguishes between cooperation and assistance with the invasion," close quote. Karzai went on to warn that he too might join a campaign of, quote, national resistance, close quote. What is going on?
There you go, Peter. Don't go to the Hindu Kush mountains for gratitude. This is, this is the lesson. Hamid Karzai is a bandit chieftain. That's the tradition he comes from. And there is something...
He's a bandit chieftain, and you say that in the nicest possible way.
I mean, he's just a bandit.
All
and
right.
Hamid Karzai, as we know, basically, and the cat was let out of the bag by our ambassador, the US ambassador to Kabul, General Eikenberry, who happens to be both an ambassador and a former commander in Afghanistan. He said that Hamid Karzai and his people have no interest in the US leaving Afghanistan. They want the U.S. stuck on the scene. They want the money of the U.S., they want the support of the U.S., and then...
And Eikenberry's ambassador, former general, said this in a memorandum which somehow ended up in the New York Times.
Absolutely.
All right.
There is, as we know...
And that's correct. His assessment was correct.
His assessment was completely on the mark. And the dark message of his assessment, the Afghan campaign can't be won. That the Afghans really have no interest in the U.S. leaving their country. And he said of Karzai, he has no interest in assuming burden of governing Afghanistan. And so comes this Hamid Karzai going rogue on us, if you will. That's the description. Borrowing the title of Sarah Palin's book, I said, we have an ally in Kabul who's going rogue on us. And this is the dilemma of America in Afghanistan.
One sentence, two sentences of advice to President Obama about Afghanistan.
Well, I don't think President Obama should make Afghanistan the so-called central front on the war on terror, because in the bazaar, that just increases the price of the Afghan real estate. It gives the Afghans a sense they could blackmail us, that we're so dependent on their largesse and so dependent on their hospitality. We must tell the Afghans unequivocally that we have other concerns in this war on terror, that Afghanistan is not the central front on the war on terror. I'm worried about people who believe that Twitter and Facebook and so on will overthrow the Iranian regime. I have many, many Iranian friends. I respect their desire to see their country overthrow this tyranny, this theocracy. My worry is it can't be done that easily. My worry is that a regime which is invested in the lower middle class, a regime which has these Basij, millions of volunteers, they're vigilantes, a regime which is anchored in the Revolutionary Guard, which is the most radical element in Iranian society, and a regime which is a petrocracy. It's petroleum and autocracy. It's a petrocracy, a regime which has oil money, that with this oil money, the supreme leader can violate and can defy the laws of gravity in Iran, and he could actually keep his regime going.
Mark writes, quote, that there are only, quote, 3 possible resolutions to the present struggle, close quote. And he just clicks through them. Sure. One is that the West could submit to Islam, and that means the end of Western civilization.
Okay.
That's out. 2, we could destroy Islam. Just be cold-blooded about it. But, quoting Mark, the slaughter would change America beyond recognition, close quote, and to put it mildly. Sure. 3, reform Islam, but, quote, ultimately only Muslims can reform Islam. All the free world can do is create conditions that increase the likelihood of Muslim reform, close quote, including a democratic Iraq, making progress in Afghanistan, and so forth. All right, so series of questions around that. And the first, of course, is, do you agree with that fundamental analysis? Those are the three choices. That seems right, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, there I could walk with him through the Aleppo Bazaar, if you will, with Mark. We can't destroy Islam. Islam is 1.5 billion people.
Right.
All the way from Indonesia in the east to Morocco in the west. It's 1/4 of mankind. Islam is vast and varied. It's one form of Islam in Indonesia, quite another form of Islam in Pakistan, quite another form of Islam in Iraq. For example, I had the honor of interviewing in Iraq and getting to meet and see Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, the most revered Shia jurist in the entire Shia world. You come to his home, it's separated from the street by a piece of batik, a very modest home where this greatest of jurists with enormous power over the believers in Iran and Iraq just is sitting on a cushion on the floor with a fan overhead and a modest place and a belief in democracy and a belief in the human rights of Iraqis and a dread, like when you see him, when you talk to him, a dread of anything radical, bombers, radicals, jihadists. He loathes all this. So, there is all kinds of Islam. Now, where Mark Stein is right, the battle for Islamic reform is a Muslim battle. What we can do is we can help, if you will, nudge the Islamic world in the right direction. We can...
Well, what's a nudge? What's a nudge?
Well, we nudge them in Iraq. We created the conditions in Iraq.
All right, so a nudge can be quite a big, difficult, bloody thing.
Right. Indeed, we nudge them with the diplomacy of freedom of George W. Bush, which Barack Obama abandoned. President George W. Bush talked about the reform of Egypt and Saudi Arabia and was very forthright about it.